Hello, thank you for joining us and a very warm welcome to the Rekindling the Legacy podcast. I'm Professor Andrew Davies.
And I'm Dr. Juhi Gupta, and together we are here to retell the stories of some of the heroic women who fought for their freedom against all the odds and made India the nation it is today.
You are here at the very beginning of this epic journey. This is the very first episode of the very first season of the podcast.
Many thanks to you for joining us on what we hope will be an inspirational journey through the lives and experiences of some of the underestimated, often unacknowledged, pioneering women who shaped Indian history.
And it's a great day for us to be recording this because it's the 15th of August. It is 78 years today since India won its independence from the UK, a day for all of India to celebrate.
This podcast is about stories you may not have heard in school. It's about voices that were powerful, determined, and revolutionary, and yet somehow were left out of the spotlight. We are talking about India's women freedom fighters. When we think of freedom movement, certain names come to mind: Gandhi, Nehru, Bhagat Singh, Azad. But there were hundreds of women who fought just as fiercely. Women who picked up arms, ran underground networks, led marches, published revolutionary papers, sheltered fugitives, and inspired millions.
And yet, how many of us know their names? Have we all heard, for example, of Durgawati Devi, who helped Bhagat Singh escape the police and carried weapons under her sari to hide them? Or Matanjini Hazra, who at the age of 73 led a procession and was shot by British police, was still holding on to the national flag as she died? Or Rani Gadinliu, who led a tribal revolt in the northeast when she was just a teenager?
We are not just revisiting these stories out of nostalgia or patriotism. We are doing it because they mean something right now, today. History is not just a record of what happened. It's a map of how we got here and what we have forgotten along the way. And forgetting comes at a cost. When we erase women from history, we shrink the space women are allowed to occupy in the present. We start believing the lie that only men led revolution, that only certain kinds of people have changed the world, that courage looks a certain way.
But the truth is, courage has many forms. Sometimes it looked like Uda Devi, the Dalit woman who climbed a tree during the 1857 uprising to shoot down British soldiers until she herself was finally killed. Courage sometimes looks like that of Aruna Asif Ali, who hoisted the national flag during the Quit India movement while others hesitated to do so. Courage looked like thousands of unnamed women who marched, cooked, hid fugitives, spread the word, and held the line at great personal cost.
This podcast is about lighting a spark, not to glorify the past, but to reckon with it, to understand how resistance was built and how it was silenced, and how, even in silence, it endured.
So each week we will bring you a brief 10-minute insight into one woman's story, told through her life, her choices, and the time that she lived in. Sometimes in special episodes we'll talk to historians, activists, and writers. We'll look at letters, memoirs, and forgotten archives. But more importantly, each episode we'll try and connect the dots between then and now.
Because the challenges those women faced, injustice, erasure, inequality, have not disappeared. They have just changed form. The questions they grappled with are still the ones we are asking today. What does it mean to fight for freedom? Who gets to lead? What does bravery look like when the world is not watching?
So maybe by listening to their stories, we'll find answers, or at least be able to ask better questions. We'll find inspiration in these women's defiance and learn lessons from their persistence.
maybe we should just take a moment to explain why we are personally so invested in this topic and think it's such an important one. We are both academics. I've been teaching women's studies at Aligarh Muslim University for past 15 years and run an NGO called Inclusive Futures Foundation, which is working to empower and support women and people from other marginalized communities.
I, on the other hand, am a professor of religion at a British university, the University of Birmingham. And I've spent my career thinking about how religion influences people's lives and motivates their decisions, how ethics and values feed into our leadership choices, how faith shapes the way we look at the world. Dr. Juhi and I have worked together on a variety of projects around women and religion in India, women's leadership, ethical and value-based leadership. And in the course of that work, we've noticed two important truths. Firstly, that stories really matter. Secondly, that women's stories are often sidelined and ignored.
So why is it so important to tell women's stories? It is important because we believe that India's freedom struggle was not just led by men. It was shaped and sustained by countless women whose courage and sacrifices must never be forgotten. Acknowledging their contribution restores historical truth and reminds us that the fight for freedom was a collective effort, inclusive of all voices. It also challenges the patriarchal tendency to sideline women's achievements, affirming their equal capacity for leadership and nation building. By honoring these women, we not only celebrate their heroism, but also inspire future generations to believe in equality, courage, and justice. True freedom lies not only in independence from colonial rule, but also in recognizing the power of women in shaping the nation.
So that is why you find a British scholar of religion working with an Indian expert on women's studies to revisit and promote some of these stories. Stories that are mostly from much darker periods in our shared history as nations. The UK-India relationship is one of the most important international connections for both of our countries. And whereas it's very much a forward-looking, mutually beneficial collaboration today, it is strongly shaped by our shared history, as well as by our shared present in the living bridge of the British Indian community. One of the lessons that we'll learn from this podcast series is that history isn't just about the past. It changes the present and it will influence the future too.
And for this reason, we always conclude our episodes by asking and answering a simple question. What was her legacy? In other words, what difference did her life make? What are the lessons we should learn from her? How can she inspire us? The practical impact of these women's lives today is critically important.
It's important because the world that we live in is increasingly uncertain and increasingly unsettled. And whilst we all hope and pray that we'll never need to take up a sword and fight physically, we will certainly need the courage to stand up and speak up for justice and freedom, for the rights of the oppressed and the disadvantaged. And not all the stories that we'll hear about are stories of war and of military conquest. Some of them were about political or diplomatic victories. And again, not always was the enemy a military force. Sometimes the biggest struggle that we face in our own lives is with our own challenges, our own fears and our own emotions. The heroines of our podcast all learned that lesson and faced down their futures, perhaps not always confidently, and rarely without fear, but always bravely.
So if you've ever wondered where the women were in Indian history, the real ones, complicated, bold, unapologetic ones, this podcast is for you. This season, we'll travel from colonial prisons to quiet villages, from courtrooms to battlefields, tracing the footprints left by women who refuse to stay in the margins. And as we do that, we hope you'll see what we see. The legacy is not something you inherit. It's something you choose to carry, something you rekindle.
So thank you, dear listeners, so very much for joining us. We hope to have you join us again for our next episode and the story of a remarkable Indian woman freedom fighter. We're starting the series with a particularly epic and famous story that you won't want to miss, so we'll see you there.